Every generation tells itself the same story, that the world is broken and they are the ones who will fix it. But Gen Z is different. They weren't born into stability, only to watch it unravel later. They were born in the ruins. If you ask a baby boomer what childhood felt like, you'll often hear about freedom, riding bikes until the streetlights came on, jobs that paid enough to buy a house, the sense that the future was a straight road waiting for them. Ask a millennial, and they'll describe the optimism of the 90s, the rise of the internet, the illusion that if you just studied hard, took on debt, and played by the rules, things would work out. But ask a member of Gen Z, and the story is different. Their earliest memories are tinted by collapse, the housing crisis of 2008, endless wars flashing on TV screens, climate disasters creeping closer each year. They never knew a world that felt safe, or stable, or certain. For them, chaos is not the interruption. Chaos is the background noise of existence. And this is what makes them unlike anyone who came before. They are not the hopeful children of the future that every past generation imagined themselves to be. They are the survivors of the present. And yet, in that survival, something remarkable has emerged. A new way of seeing the world. A perspective no other generation has carried. One shaped by loneliness, irony, digital lives, and a strange resilience that hides beneath it all. This is the story of Gen Z, not just what makes them different, but what makes them necessary. Imagine being a child in 2008. You're too young to understand what subprime mortgages or Wall Street collapse means. But you can feel the tension in your parents' voices, the worry over bills, the sudden quiet at dinner tables. You see families packing up, moving out of homes they thought they'd never leave.
This is Gen Z's earliest imprint of the world. Adults panicking, institutions failing, the ground beneath them crumbling. Unlike millennials, who still believed in the dream of upward mobility, the white picket fence, the career ladder, the promise of college, Gen Z grew up already doubting it. The lie had been exposed before they even stepped onto the stage. It's not that they're lazy or cynical. It's that they were trained in doubt. Everywhere they looked, the old systems were cracking. The planet warming, politics poisoned by polarization, technology racing forward but leaving people more disconnected than ever. And so, they inherited a philosophy. Don't trust the system. Trust yourself. Or maybe no one. This distrust runs deeper than many realize. While previous generations debated how much to trust authority, Gen Z often starts from the opposite assumption, that authority is corrupt until proven otherwise. Think about it. Politicians who promise change but deliver nothing. Corporations selling sustainability while burning the planet. Universities charging 6 figures for degrees that no longer guarantee jobs. If Gen Z sounds skeptical, it's because they learned skepticism as a survival skill. But here's the paradox. Skepticism did not make them cold. It made them sensitive. Because when you grow up seeing how fragile everything is, you also see how fragile people are. You start to care more about mental health, about inequality, about the subtle wounds others carry. Gen Z is the first generation to speak openly about anxiety and depression, not as private shame, but as public reality. Where their parents bottled things up, they post about it. Where their grandparents avoided the topic, they turn it into memes. To the outside world, this can look strange, even weak.
But if you see it from inside, it's something else entirely. A recognition that survival today isn't just about food and shelter, but about keeping your mind intact in a collapsing world. This is why Gen Z has a unique moral compass. They do not chase stability because they've never known it. Instead, they chase authenticity. They want to know what is real, in people, in art, in themselves. Because reality has always felt slippery, unstable. In a sense, Gen Z is the first truly post-truth generation. Not because they don't care about truth, but because they've been forced to grow up in a world where truth is contested at every turn. Fake news, deep fakes, propaganda, viral misinformation. And so, they've developed something remarkable, an instinct to read between the lines. Where older generations often take things at face value, Gen Z constantly asks, what's the angle? Who benefits? What's the agenda? This makes them harder to deceive, but also harder to satisfy. Because when you see through everything, you risk believing in nothing. And yet, despite this heavy inheritance, Gen Z has found ways to adapt, even thrive. They've learned to build meaning in fragments, to create identity in digital spaces, to survive in loneliness, to laugh at collapse. They are not a generation of ruin, as some claim. They are a generation of paradox, a generation learning how to breathe in smoke and still find air. If every generation has a landscape they call home, Gen Z's homeland is not a place. It is a screen. They are the first true digital natives, not just a generation that uses the internet, but a generation that was raised by it. For them, the internet isn't an escape from reality. It is reality. Think about it. A millennial remembers dial-up tones screeching through the living room. A Gen Xer remembers when online meant a library computer lab. But Gen Z, they don't remember logging on because they never logged off. The internet wasn't something they entered. It was the water they were born swimming in. For Gen Z, childhood playdates weren't only in backyards, they were in Minecraft servers. Friendships weren't just made at school lockers, but in group chats that never slept. When they wanted advice, they didn't turn to a parent or a teacher. They opened YouTube. When they wanted to laugh, they didn't wait for Saturday morning cartoons. They scrolled TikTok, looping 30-second bursts of absurdity until hours had disappeared. This immersion created something revolutionary, a generation fluent in the languages of digital culture. They can sense trends before they happen, read irony hidden in memes, detect the emotional temperature of a community through its emojis. But it also created something haunting, because the same place where they found connection became the place where they felt most alone. Here is the paradox. Gen Z is the most connected generation in human history, and yet the loneliest. Surveys show friendship rates declining, dating shrinking, social groups dissolving. And yet, this same generation sends hundreds of messages a day, streams live to millions, and builds identities visible to the entire world. So why the loneliness? Because connection is not the same as closeness. Because likes are not the same as love. Because followers cannot hold you when you cry. Gen Z knows this better than anyone. They've experienced the ache of scrolling through endless stories, seeing everyone together while they sit alone in a room. They've learned that even when the phone buzzes constantly, silence still echoes inside. And this is why loneliness is no longer just a personal emotion. For Gen Z, it has become a cultural condition, a shared norm. They talk about it openly, joke about it, meme about it. Me and my depression at 3 a.m. It is no longer shameful to be lonely. It is expected. Almost everyone feels it. Almost no one escapes it. But digital life didn't just reshape connection. It reshaped identity. Older generations had one self, the person they were at home, at work, in public. Gen Z has many. There's the version on Instagram, carefully curated with filters and captions. The version on TikTok, exaggerated and funny, chasing relatability. The version in private group chats, unfiltered and raw. The version alone, staring at a screen in silence. These selves overlap, collide, and sometimes contradict. And yet, this multiplicity feels natural to Gen Z. Where past generations saw identity as fixed, find yourself, Gen Z sees identity as fluid. Create yourself again and again. This is why they are more comfortable with fluidity in gender, sexuality, culture, and self-expression. To them, identity is not a box, but a shifting playlist. You can add, remix, delete, and start over. Philosophers once asked, "Who am I really?" Gen Z asks, "Who am I right now? And who do I want to be next?" But this freedom carries a cost. When your identity lives online, so does your worth. And worth is measured in numbers, likes, shares, followers, views. Suddenly, your very existence feels like it has a scoreboard. This is not just stressful, it's existential. Because the self is no longer just lived, it is performed. Every outfit, every thought, every trip becomes content. The boundary between I am and I post dissolves. Some thrive in this performance, turning themselves into brands, monetizing authenticity. Others collapse under the pressure, comparing their messy lives to the highlight reels of strangers. And so, the internet becomes both stage and mirror. It offers the promise of recognition and the threat of erasure. If no one engages, do you even exist? Here lies the haunting truth. Gen Z is not only a generation of digital natives, they are also a generation of digital ghosts. Their childhood photos are stored in forgotten Facebook albums. Their teenage identities linger in abandoned Twitter handles. Their past selves, awkward, insecure, cringeworthy, remain floating in servers forever, waiting to be rediscovered. No other generation has lived like this. Every mistake, every experiment, every unfinished version of the self is archived, eternal, searchable, undeletable. And so they live with a strange awareness that the past is never gone, that the internet never forgets, that they will always be haunted by echoes of who they used to be. This is why Gen Z is more forgiving of flaws, more open about mistakes. They know everyone has ghosts. They know everyone has receipts. What does all this mean? It means that Gen Z doesn't just use technology, they exist through it. Their sense of time, space, and self is entangled with it. Where their grandparents asked, "What is real?" Gen Z asks, "Does it matter?" Because when you spend years switching between physical life and digital life, you stop drawing strict lines. Both worlds feel equally real, or equally unreal. This has profound consequences. It shapes how they view politics, relationships, meaning, even death. And it sets the stage for the next truth, that in a world where everything is connected, loneliness has become the new normal. There is a silence that runs through Gen Z's world. It isn't the silence of peace. It is the silence of empty rooms, dim screens, unread messages. Loneliness is no longer the exception. It is the atmosphere. In past generations, community was built into life. Your neighbors knew your name. Your school friends lived on your block. Families gathered weekly, whether they wanted to or not. But for Gen Z, the map looks different. Neighborhoods are quiet. Extended families are scattered. Churches, clubs, and town halls,
once the glue of social life, have thinned to ghosts of what they used to be. Even schools, once places of unfiltered social energy, have been swallowed by screens. Friendships exist in group chats more than in living rooms. Conversations happen in bursts of text, not in the flow of voices. The old bonds dissolved, and in their place, an infinite feed of strangers. At first, loneliness felt like failure. It was the quiet shame no one admitted, the gap no one spoke aloud. But Gen Z turned that silence into sound. They made it a language. Scroll through TikTok and you'll see it. Jokes about being the friend who never gets invited. Memes about crying in the dark. Confessions whispered into microphones at 2 a.m. What was once private pain has become public expression. Everyone feels alone, so no one hides it anymore. But here's the dark twist. This honesty hasn't solved the loneliness. It has normalized it. Loneliness is no longer treated as a wound to be healed. It is treated as the baseline of life. You are supposed to be lonely. You are supposed to carry emptiness. If you aren't, you're the exception. Psychologists measure loneliness as if it were an individual issue. But for Gen Z, it is cultural, collective, a shadow stitched into their generation's DNA. Why? Because loneliness is not just the absence of people, it is the absence of certainty. When you can't trust institutions, when you can't rely on stability, when the world feels like it might collapse any moment, you retreat. You guard yourself. You stay in your room because the world outside feels like quicksand. Gen Z did not choose loneliness. Loneliness chose them. It arrived through lockdowns, through economic pressures, through years of being told that the outside world was dangerous, polluted, collapsing. And now, even when doors reopened, the habit stayed. The room became safer than the crowd. The screen became safer than the street. Listen closely to how Gen Z talks, and you'll hear a strange phenomenon. Phrases like, "I don't have the capacity," "I'm setting boundaries." This is triggering. What once belonged to therapists now belongs to everyday speech. This is not by accident. It is the language of a generation trying to control the uncontrollable. If the world cannot be fixed, maybe feelings can. If society collapses, at least you can regulate your breathing. But here lies the darkness. Sometimes this language doesn't heal. Sometimes it numbs. Because when every problem becomes trauma, when every disappointment becomes toxic, life itself starts to feel unbearable. The vocabulary meant to save you becomes the very thing that chains you to your isolation. Perhaps the most haunting paradox of all. Gen Z is the loneliest generation in history, and yet they are not lonely alone. They know others feel it. They see it in the memes, in the late-night posts, in the silence of unread group chats. And so, loneliness has become a form of community, a strange solidarity. We are together in our separateness. But what kind of society does this create? A society where intimacy feels dangerous, where connection feels temporary, where solitude becomes the safest place to live. Loneliness for Gen Z is not just a feeling, it is a worldview. It teaches them that permanence is an illusion, that closeness cannot be trusted, that every bond is fragile, every presence fleeting. This may sound bleak, and it is, but it is also clarity. Because when you expect nothing to last, you stop lying to yourself. You see reality in its rawest form. And yet, this clarity comes at a price. It hardens the heart before it has the chance to fully open. Ironically, Gen Z mirrors an older generation, their great-grandparents who lived through war and depression. Those ancestors also learned to be guarded, quiet, suspicious of joy. But unlike their great-grandparents, Gen Z's war is not fought with guns and bombs. It is fought with silence. It is fought with absence. It is fought in the mind. and the battlefield has no end. Gen Z is not just lonely. They are fluent in loneliness. They have made it a culture, a meme, a joke, a confession. But beneath the irony, beneath the laughter, one truth lingers. They long for something more. They long for a closeness that no screen can give. They long for a touch that no like can replace. And it is this longing, hidden, unspoken, sometimes mocked, that may yet define them. Because to be fluent in loneliness is not the same as being satisfied by it. And every silence, no matter how deep, waits for a voice to break it. After the silence of loneliness comes something unexpected. Laughter. But not the bright, carefree laughter of childhood. Not the polite laughter of social gatherings. Gen Z laughs in a different key, sharp, ironic, dark. Their humor lives on the edge of despair, and that is exactly what makes it powerful. Imagine scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m. You see a video, someone joking about not being able to afford rent, but dancing to upbeat music. Or a meme that says, "Me laughing at my trauma because therapy is too expensive." You chuckle, and at the same time you feel the sting of truth. This is Gen Z humor. It isn't about escaping reality. It's about staring reality in the face and laughing anyway. It's gallows humor turned into culture. Older generations wrote essays, manifestos, or op-eds to express their worldview. Gen Z compresses entire philosophies into memes, one image, one caption. And suddenly you know, life is absurd, capitalism is broken, we're all depressed, none of us are okay. It may look like a joke, but it is also a diagnosis. The meme is not just entertainment, it is a mirror. And the mirror tells a story that is both painful and hilarious. Why this obsession with irony? Because irony is armor. When you turn your pain into a joke, it cannot crush you in the same way. When you laugh at your own despair, you regain control. If loneliness is the wound, irony is the bandage. But it's more than just self-protection. It is also a way of bonding. Think of the countless memes about procrastination, anxiety, existential dread. Everyone shares them. Everyone laughs. Not because the joke is brilliant, but because the recognition is instant. Ah, you feel this too. And suddenly, for a moment, you are less alone. There's a reason Gen Z loves absurd, surreal humor. The kind of videos where someone edits a raccoon into a presidential debate, or where a sentence dissolves into chaos halfway through. This isn't just random nonsense. It's a reflection of their worldview, because the world itself feels absurd. News cycles are chaos, politics are theater, the economy is a rigged game. So when reality feels like a joke, the only sane response is to make the joke bigger, to exaggerate it until it collapses under its own weight. It's not that Gen Z doesn't take life seriously, it's that life is already so ridiculous, seriousness feels dishonest. But here's the thing about dark humor. It always has teeth. Behind the laughter lies real pain. Behind the absurdity lies real fear. When Gen Z jokes about not living past 30 because of climate change, it isn't just comedy. It's a quiet scream. When they joke about never being able to buy a house, it isn't just sarcasm. It's despair disguised as wit. This is what makes their humor unique. It is laughter layered over tragedy. It's comedy that admits the wound, even while it tries to cover it. Philosophers once argued that laughter is a release, a pressure valve for the unbearable weight of existence. That's exactly how Gen Z uses it. In a world of collapse, irony is survival. In a culture of loneliness, humor is communion. In an economy of exploitation, memes are rebellion. Every joke is more than entertainment. It is a coded message. We see the absurdity. We know this system is broken. And if we can laugh at it, maybe it can't fully control us. There is a strange strength in this. Because laughter, once dismissed as trivial, has become a weapon. It undermines authority. It destabilizes power. It flips despair into defiance. Gen Z doesn't storm the castle gates with swords. They storm them with memes. They mock what is supposed to be untouchable. They turn the powerful into punchlines. And in doing so, they reveal a secret. That even in ruin, there is joy. That even in despair, there is laughter. That even in silence, there is noise. Gen Z does not laugh instead of crying. They laugh while they cry. And in that contradiction, they carve out a strange kind of hope. Because when you can turn your pain into a joke, when you can laugh at the absurdity of existence, you have already proven something profound. The world may be broken, but you are still alive enough to laugh at it. Now, other than their personal life, Gen Z's work life also looks very different than previous generations. There was a time when success meant a corner office, a gold watch after 40 years of service, a neat pension plan, and a tidy lawn. There was a time when loyalty to a corporation was painted as loyalty to your own future. Work hard, they said, sacrifice now, and someday, you will be rewarded. But Gen Z looked at that promise and saw the cracks. They watched their parents grind away only to be laid off without warning. They saw entire industries replaced by automation. They witnessed the myth of the stable job collapse into gig work, unpaid internships, and corporate burnout disguised as ambition. So they began to ask the question that terrifies the old guard. What if the game of success itself is a lie? Gen Z is not lazy. They are not entitled. They are not allergic to hard work. They are allergic to pointless work, to soul-crushing labor that strips life of meaning, to the hollow hustle that pretends long hours are the measure of your worth. They see through hustle culture, the cult that glorifies burnout as a badge of honor. They laugh at the gurus selling rise and grind as if exhaustion were enlightenment. They know that worshipping the paycheck while sacrificing your spirit is just another kind of slavery. And so, with quiet defiance, Gen Z is rewriting the script. Success is no longer defined by climbing a corporate ladder built by someone else. Success is creating a ladder of your own, or better yet, burning the ladder altogether and choosing to walk freely on untamed ground. They are building new economies from their bedrooms, turning side hustles into lifelines, creating digital collectives instead of climbing pyramids. They are rejecting the old equation: time equals money, loyalty equals security, sacrifice equals reward. Instead, they are asking, what is the value of my freedom? What is the worth of my creativity? What is the point of chasing wealth if it costs me my soul? For the first time, an entire generation is refusing to be tricked into equating productivity with identity. They are saying no to the false gods of endless labor. And in that refusal, there is rebellion. Imagine how radical this truly is. A young person looking at the system and whispering, "I will not give you my life in exchange for scraps." That whisper is dangerous, because whispers spread, because whispers become movements. This is why corporations fear Gen Z, not because they are lazy, but because they are no longer afraid to walk away. Because they understand that loyalty to a broken system is just submission in disguise. And so, Gen Z is redefining success, not as blind loyalty, not as endless hours, not as a hollow title or a corner office, but as freedom, as authenticity, as the ability to create, to live, to breathe without chains, and make no mistake. This is not just personal rebellion, it is a philosophical revolution. It is the realization that a life measured only in profits is not a life worth living. Gen Z is not asking for a seat at the table. They are flipping the table over and building their own. And on that table, they do not serve profits. They serve meaning. They serve connection. They serve life. Gen Z stands at the edge of history, a generation shaped not by quiet traditions, but by contradictions sharp enough to cut. They are lonely, yet more connected than any who came before. Cynical, yet somehow still hopeful. Fragile in their honesty, yet stronger than the walls that tried to contain them. They are the first generation to truly embrace contradictions, not as weaknesses, but as truths. They have seen through the illusion of endless growth and called it what it is: emptiness. They have taken loneliness, the curse of their time, and turned it into art, into rebellion, into community built on honesty rather than masks. They have stripped the glitter from success and found something far more dangerous underneath: freedom. They don't worship institutions, and they don't kneel before hollow gods of work and wealth. They see through the games, the scams, the promises that broke their parents' backs, and still they dare to dream, not of going back, not of rebuilding what was already corrupt, but of something new, something uncharted. Perhaps that is Gen Z's true philosophy, not the rejection of the past, but the embrace of the paradox of the present. To live in contradiction and still live fully. To know the system is broken and still create. To be isolated and still find connection. To carry despair and still hold on to hope. This is what makes them dangerous. This is what makes them necessary, because in their refusal to choose between fragile or strong, hopeful or cynical, connected or alone, they reveal a deeper truth: that life itself is contradiction, and the only way to live it honestly is not to resolve the paradox, but to embody it. Gen Z does not run from the paradox, they live inside it, and in doing so they remind us all of something the older world forgot: that maybe the truest form of freedom is not in certainty, but in daring to exist fully within the tension of opposites. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the beginning of a new kind of humanity. This isn't just a video, it's a rebellion against silence. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's turn isolation into conversation. Hit like, subscribe, and stand with me as we tear down illusions and build a new way of thinking, a new way of living. See you in the next video.